Welcome back to On the Move. This is Monday, January 16th, and this is Victor Shi. Our guest today is someone who I have been itching to talk to for a long time, and I'm sure you have seen on Twitter or elsewhere. And it's a conversation that has never been more relevant because we're all digitally connected. Gen Z is a generation that is more digitally connected than any other generation, and we all must be equipped because with the tools necessary to respond to malicious actors on the internet who are trying to sow division, fear, and chaos. And our guest today is Christopher Bouzy, who started coding when he was just 9 years old and has taken his skills to look at trolling and bots on social media platforms. And now, with the death of Twitter after Elon Musk's taken over, he's in the works of offering a new, better social media platform called Bot Sentinel. So, Christopher, thank you so much for being here. It's so great to see you.
Hey, Victor, thank you for having me. And the platform name is actually Spoutable, but that's good.
Spoutable. Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
good. Okay.
cool.
So we will get to that. Okay. So
Sure,
Spoutable
sure.
is the new social media platform that you are in the works. But with all of the Prince Harry and Meghan news, I want to start off our conversation by talking about something I saw you say in their recent Netflix documentary. And I just want to read you a particular quote that you said,
Sure.
which I thought was particularly powerful. You said, quote, "We looked at 114,000 tweets and determined that 70% of the hateful content came from just 83 accounts and had a reach of 17 million people. So this isn't your average trolling. They were coordinating what they would discuss for that particular day or week, what pictures to disseminate. They were actively recruiting people, telling people how to make multiple accounts, how to use VPNs to hide the VP so they don't get suspended." I knew that trolling was bad, but didn't quite know that it was this bad. First, talk to us about trolling specifically as it relates to Meghan.
Sure. Before she even married Harry, there were folks that were, putting out mis and disinformation about her, but it escalated after she married him when she was really thrusted into the spotlight. And there were groups of individuals who would create accounts to go after her, whether it was pushing out falsehoods,
Mhm.
creating, as I discussed in the documentary, fake photos and memes and things of that
Yeah,
nature,
yeah.
and disseminated it all over the internet. And for her, look, celebrities go through this. Unfortunately, they have folks who say terrible things about them. I have people who say terrible things about
Mhm,
me. So when you're
mhm.
in the spotlight, this is something that you unfortunately have to deal with. However, it's a difference between that and individuals who are creating groups and accounts
Yeah, yeah.
and doing this day in and day out.
Absolutely. So when I heard you talk about this, I instantly thought about something that Asha Rangappa talks about a lot, which is that we're living in this kind of age of an information warfare where we're all kind of on a so-called battleground with these groups of people, with these actors. I'm wondering what you think of that idea and how you think that Meghan and Harry push back against those trolls and narratives and groups so effectively.
Well, yeah, look. This is a war.
Mhm.
It is an information war. It's we're all involved in it, whether it be COVID-19 mis and
Mhm.
disinformation,
Mhm.
or climate change mis and disinformation, or in Harry and Meghan's case, personal attacks and targeted harassment and things of that nature. And they were effective because look, there are folks out there who believe of the Streisand effect, that
Mhm.
when you bring attention to something, it
Right.
amplifies it, and it's true. There is that effect. However, we can no longer allow things to just fester.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
have to push back against this stuff, and I do think they were effective because they did not follow that rule
Right.
about ignoring stuff. They brought attention to it, and it allowed people to see just how insidious this is.
I mean, it truly is insidious, and that's one of the questions I actually was wondering about, which is, one of the things I often struggle with, and I'm curious to hear your take on is, what do you do in the face of this massive troll army coming after you? Maybe we can apply it specifically on Twitter. Do you think it's best to ignore them, which, I mean, to me, runs the risk of maybe letting them spread their false narratives, or do you address them head on, which also, I guess, runs the risk of perhaps amplifying their message? What do you think is the right way to approach those massive troll armies, say on like Twitter or other social media platforms?
Right. Well, first thing, it depends on the individual being targeted. It
Yeah.
depends on how extensive the campaign is. Thankfully for Harry and Meghan, they have a significant platform.
Hmm.
So they can
Hmm.
talk about these things and bring awareness to it, where they can debunk it, and sometimes in real time, where
Yeah. Yeah.
someone may not be as fortunate as that, and they're dealing with it. So it really is a case by case basis. I could just give you an example with Lisa Page. We had looked into a trolling campaign against her. Um, and with Lisa Page, it was similar where there were accounts that were created to go after her, but they wasn't so much putting out mis and disinformation about her. It was more about talking about personal aspects of her life,
Mm.
and calling her extremely bad things.
Mm.
And this was ongoing for months and years, actually, where you would have these accounts where she would tweet something and they would just swarm her and say some of the most horrific things.
Mm.
So it just depends, and it is a case by case basis.
That's really interesting. So I know beyond Harry and Meghan, you mentioned that you also looked at MAGA QAnon and COVID misinformation and climate change misinformation. First, talk to us about what Bot Sentinel is. That's your kind of area, and that's the thing that you developed. What is that, and what type of kind of volume and bots have you seen in those other areas?
Right. So, BotSignal in short of it is it's a platform that tracks mis and disinformation and inauthentic accounts.
Hmm.
We provide tools to researchers and just average everyday users to allow them to distinguish between inauthentic accounts, and real individuals or people who are problematic,
Yeah.
who may be, a troll, a human control account that's just once again, on Twitter or whatever platform to cause chaos, to give them an idea about this account using, our technology, which is machine learning AI, and it's a score and all other stuff. But we also have another side where we produce and publish these reports by doing the research and looking at some of these campaigns. So like you said,
Hmm.
whether it was
Hmm.
QAnon, MAGA, look, we even looked at some stuff with VP Harris where there were accounts
Hmm.
that were
Hmm.
targeting her. So that's pretty much the gist of it. And then we work with news outlets to actually bring this to the attention of the public. We have worked with pretty much every major news outlet in the United States
Wow.
and abroad.
So, you talked about, kind of their strategy targeting individuals like Lisa Page, and we saw this specifically with Megan as well. I mean, there seems to be this level of perniciousness and personal element to it. What are some other tactics or techniques that these bots use to, I guess, really sow that division and fear and chaos?
Right. I mean, look, a lot these folks took the playbook from Russia from the 2016
Hmm.
election.
Hmm.
And I always try to explain to people this is not a sophisticated operation.
Hmm.
If with enough time and learning, your grandmother could do this. This is
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Anyone with an internet connection and a computer or cell phone could do this. You set up
Hmm.
a few accounts and you're off to the races.
Yeah.
Um, so once again, it depends on what the goal of the group is. Are you trying to sway public opinion for or against someone? So in the case of Amber Heard, there were groups of folks that were out there, disparaging her, trying to make her seem as
Hmm.
she was this
Hmm.
abuser and an extremely bad person. So whether you liked her or not, that campaign was real, and we showed that, and we showed the accounts, and we showed what they were doing on
Yeah.
Twitter,
Yeah.
manipulating hashtags and things of that nature. But every campaign, is different. With Harry and Meghan, and I was asked this quite a few times, like, what's the end game here?
Hmm. Hmm.
She moved from the UK. She's here in the United States. They're no longer really active royals and things like that. So why is there so much hate? And I said in the documentary, it's about hatred and racism.
Yeah. Yeah.
These folks just don't like the fact that a woman of color has children who are in the line of succession.
Mhm.
they're just not happy about that.
Yeah. I think what you touch on raises such an important point, and I'm not sure I can quite contextualize this effectively, but it's kind of about how we don't live in a social media era that's just kind of one person, one voice anymore. Social media and these bots have, I think, really allowed this particular message, and usually lies and falsehoods, to get amplified and transferred in a way that I don't think many people can get their minds around. So I'm wondering, maybe a two-part question. First, how do you think social media companies can change this, and kind of, I don't know what the antidote is for social media companies, and then also maybe more generally for young people who are more digitally connected than ever before, and people who are on the internet. How do we push back against misinformation? Just your ordinary person on Twitter or Instagram or any other social media platform.
Well, okay. So first, the platforms have no incentive to change things.
Right, right.
Unfortunately, this type of engagement is profitable for them. If you take YouTube for example, many of these folks have YouTube channels that are dedicated to going after Meghan Markle, where they're pushing out, publishing content that is, would be considered disinformation or defamatory. And YouTube does nothing about it and
Hmm.
monetizes their content and
Hmm.
pays them. Um, Platforms like Twitter, they thrive on us engaging in ways that sometimes is not healthy in terms in
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of negative whatever. So I think for us to really do something that's meaningful that we can actually push back, that we're going to need legislation.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, there are going to be folks that will push back about, and saying free speech and all that other stuff. But if we continue the way that we're continuing, um, you know, I look, I always say like this is a crisis, and
Yeah.
I put it up there with, climate change. I put it up there with, COVID mis and disinformation. Like
Hmm.
we have to
Hmm.
come to something to, we have to agree on something on how to,
Yeah.
address this issue.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think legislation is important, but short of legislation, I know that you are also working on Spoutable, which is this new social media platform that is in the works. Tell us more about that and what distinguishes that from Twitter, Post, Mastodon, any other social media platform.
Right. So here, pretty much putting my money where my mouth is. So basically, these platforms, it's about profit. It's not about
Hmm.
protecting you
Hmm.
or me. It's about how much revenue can we generate from these interactions.
Yeah.
Spoutable is different. It's built on bot signals technology. We're actively going after accounts that are not, well, we will be actively going after accounts that are not, following our terms of service, our
Hmm.
rules.
Hmm.
So when you're on the platform and you're engaging, and look, we want people to be able to have those heated debates because that's what makes Twitter great, where you can say, oh, you know what, you're a jerk or whatever. But there's a difference between that and someone creating an account to purposely target you, and that's all
Yes.
that they're
Yes.
they're doing. Or unfortunately saying racist stuff or homophobic stuff or whatever. So all of that will not be allowed on the platform. So what we're trying to call it is an alternative to Twitter. Something that feels familiar but new.
Hmm. Hmm.
So you asked what distinguishes us from like Mastodon. Well, without disparaging the other platforms, there are folks that said, look, Mastodon is nice, but it's a little too difficult.
Yeah.
We're building this platform to be almost like Twitter in the sense
Hmm.
that it feels extremely familiar to you. So if you know how to navigate Twitter, you'll know how to navigate Spoutable.
Sure.
Post, um, it's once again, it's not Twitter. So there are folks on Post that are using it that like the
Mhm.
atmosphere, but they're just like it's just not the same thing. So what
Yeah.
we're trying to
Yeah.
do is recreate the energy and the feeling of Twitter without the garbage that comes with
Mm.
it.
I think that's what myself and a lot of other people who I talk to love most about Twitter, but have seen this, with Elon Musk taking over, just this huge deluge of right wing trolls and bots who are making the platform kind of unbearable. So we are all looking forward to seeing the unveiling of Spoutable. And Christopher Bouzy, thank you so much for joining. You are so right. This is a crisis, and I'm so glad that you're shining a light on this very important issue.
Thank you for having me. I
Of course.
appreciate you inviting me on.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Christopher. Well, that was such an interesting episode. Christopher Bouzy is an important voice on Twitter, and I'm so glad that we were able to chat with him today. I just have a few things today. Today, obviously, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. As a young person, we don't have school today. If you're working, I think this is a national holiday. So definitely take some time and reflect on Martin Luther King Jr. because his legacy still remains all these years later and will continue for generations to come. This is someone who I think should inspire all of us to remain committed to protecting civil rights, to protecting voting rights, especially against the backdrop of these Republicans who are trying to strip those things away. And so, Dr. King and all of his amazing quotes and speeches, I think should stay with us today. And hopefully we never forget his legacy, even though today's is a day remembering him. Hopefully, we never forget him in the days to come, in the months to come, and in our lives, because he has such an important role and has shaped so much of how we think about civil rights, voting rights, and all of these issues. And so he's with me today, and I know he's with a lot of other people. So happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. There was an interesting CNN article yesterday that I thought was interesting and worth mentioning, and it's about Gen Z and how we are now more into flip phones. So I've seen friends who do this too, and I've been mystified. And CNN did this write up yesterday, and it's this new trend in which basically Gen Zers want to basically disconnect from social media platforms and from their smart devices. So one Gen Zer that they interviewed said that when it comes time for dinner, when it comes time for an outing, they'll trade their smartphone with their flip phone. And so they see it as a good conversation starter. They describe it as a fun. It's a good vibe. It's nostalgic, and it kind of re-emphasizes, or I guess brings to light, this kind of longing from, I think, this generation that is more digitally connected again than any generation, back to this kind of vintage technology. There is also this growing trend of disposable cameras as well, but there's this kind of longing for, I think, just to disconnect and kind of go back to this era when you didn't have all these toxic social media platforms. You could just kind of be one with another person and talk to someone else like a normal human being. And so we'll see whether or not this changes things. I'm curious for all of you if you've seen this trend with any young person in your life, or any young person is kind of particularly interested in flip phones or disposable cameras anymore. But I thought it was a really interesting article, and I think speaks to this generation. I think has had a lot of criticism about how online we are, about how this online culture is zapping our ability to talk to each other. But there is, I think, now a growing movement to go back to what things might have been like a couple of decades ago with flip phones and with disposable cameras. And so let me know what you think. If there's any young person in your life who is doing the same, maybe drop it in the comments. I thought that was a particularly interesting article. And one other thing about young voters that I saw yesterday in Axios that I thought is something that I've seen particularly in the work that I do, but kind of reaffirmed it, is young voters in our political ideology. So I think there is a mental model that young voters are way more democratic, way more liberal than older generations. And while that might be true, data shows that young people skew slightly more to the left. Actually, the overwhelming consensus and overwhelming kind of ideology that young people believe in is that there is no ideology. Basically, they don't want to identify with a particular political party. So whether it's Democrats or Republicans, and right now what you see is more than 40% of young people identify actually as independents. And so I think it's kind of interesting, kind of what the response to that is. I think for Democrats, that means showing young people and those independent young voters who I guess don't really particularly engage or align with a particular political party, to really make sure that they address their concerns. I think a lot of what we've seen so far is positive with addressing things like climate change and education and mental health. But it's also about continuing that investment. It shows that young people are hard to get, that we don't really particularly identify with a political party. And so we have to keep on investing in young voters as Democrats. And for Republicans, if they want any chance to win young voters, it means listening to us. It means, understanding our concerns, addressing our concerns, and not saying that we're stupid, or not saying that, we are a generation that is, snowflake liberals, because that's just not true. And so I think on both parties, it's going to be interesting to see how we respond. Obviously, for us as Democrats, it's about always having those conversations, keeping young voters engaged, and delivering on what we care about. And so I thought that was an interesting snippet that I think shines light on Generation Z and our political leanings. So Let me know what you think about that. And then also that flip phone thing. I think it's very interesting. But that's all the news I have for you today. Just a quick programming note. Obviously, we will be back every day this week with a new episode of sorry, not IGN Politics, of On the Move with myself. It'll be at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. And we have some really exciting guests lined up this week that you do not want to miss. And you can find them on Politicon's YouTube page. Tomorrow we'll be talking with Dr. Shomamingo about the whole Harry and Meghan documentary and all that misinformation, disinformation. On Wednesday, we will talk to Marcus Flowers, who ran against Marjorie Taylor Greene, and his thoughts about what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing right now and kind of what we should be expecting and how we can vote for her out of office in 2024. On Thursday, we'll have on SC Cup, who will talk about this, again, this conservative movement and how we can push back against that. And then on Friday, we'll talk to newly elected Congresswoman Summer Lee from Pennsylvania, who is a rising star in the Democratic Party who you do not want to miss. It'll be an exciting episode of On the Move this week ahead. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great Martin Luther King Day. And I will see you all tomorrow right here at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Thanks so much.